For most of Western history, we understood what it meant to be human in two dimensions. One of these was a hierarchy of being that ranged upward from inanimate objects to plants to insects to animals to humans, and then on to angels and finally God. While we were clearly like animals, we were closer to God because God created us in God's image, with both a divine purpose and rationality. The other dimension of being human was also a hierarchy, but it described each human's place in relation to their fellow humans. Everyone had a place and a purpose and lived by God-given rules that described how they should treat other people. Everybody fit in their box. Now, three things are undermining this understanding of what it means to be human. And as they undermine this understanding of what it means to be human, they begin to create a space in which artificial intelligence can take a larger place in our social networks and our larger world of nature. The first thing undermining the traditional view of what it means to be human is most familiar to us in the US. It consists of three basic ideas. One, the idea that all persons are equal. Two, the idea that any person can and should be able to fill any social role, so there's no fixed social hierarchy, no box. And three, all social structures can and sometimes should be changed. Ours is a world born of multiple revolutions that have overthrown old social structures and replaced them with new ones, and have sometimes more peacefully evolved into something new. So we no longer think of ourselves as having been born into a specific God-given role in society or being bound by God-given rules. The beginning of the U.S. Constitution makes this very clear. We, the people of the United States of America, will make the rules by which we live. And those rules will say that anyone can play any role if they choose to do so and are able. This same assertion is closely related to another claim found in the United States and all modern constitutions. And it is the claim that we humans have rights that must be respected by our fellow humans and indeed by every human society. And this means, and this is critical to how we think about artificial intelligence, it means that we determine just who has a claim to those human rights. That was, after all, the question that led to the Civil War. Did slaves and the children of slaves have full human rights? Answering yes to that question revolutionized society. It is the question that was asked that led to child labor laws. Did children have human rights? Do women have human rights? That was the root question of the movement for women's suffrage. And already we recognize that even animals have some rights, rights protected by law. It will not be long before we must ask whether AIs have rights as well. Indeed, in our popular science fiction, it is already a question that has been examined. The second thing undermining the traditional view of what it means to be human is closely related to the first. It is our growing recognition that even in the most individualistic society, our humanity is constantly shaped by our social interactions. We do not exist within our bodies, but within the social space that creates us and gives us our human identity, our culture. That identity forming and behavior shaping social space we call culture. We are who we are because of our culture. It both grants and takes away certain possibilities of being human. Indeed, to be human is to be part of a culture. Our culture teaches us how to relate in specific ways to our fellow humans, the natural world, the objects around us. Our culture teaches us what it means to be human. The way in which our ever-evolving cultures make a place for artificial intelligence will determine not only how we act and interact with artificial intelligences, but how we think of ourselves as well. Imagine for a moment the Star Wars universe in which artificial intelligences in the form of robots are ubiquitous. As the robots become real characters in the story, the human characters change as well. Some of these human characters have deep affection for the robots. They will even risk their lives for the robots. Other characters, such as the Mandalorian, hate and mistrust the robots. Either way, the humans are different humans because artificial intelligence is part of their culture. The third thing dramatically changing our self-understanding is the evolutionary understanding of how humanity came about. In the evolutionary understanding, our humanity developed out of processes of random mutation and adaptation to different environments that are no different from the processes that created everything from bacteria to snails to dogs to chimpanzees. And indeed, because all creatures had their origin in the first single-celled organism to possess DNA, we all belong to the same family tree. We all have the same root. Moreover, because we are all part of one another's environments, we all continually adapt to one another. We have co-evolved with everything from viruses to horses to dogs, cats, and tube worms. We are all deeply interrelated and deeply in each other's business all the time. There is no me without a we. And closely related to this, the authentic me is the me shaped by DNA and all the complex processes of growth, development, and socialization that take place between me and others. This means that old hierarchical understandings, old hierarchical categories of sex, gender, sexuality, intelligence, and ability may be too rigid to allow for the possibilities of being an authentic human being. And recognizing the diversity of authenticity reminds us that our bodies can be thought of as a society of interdependent creatures that have learned how to get along with and support each other. Mitochondria, for example, which are part of each cell, have their own DNA, and they evolve independently of the DNA in the rest of our cells. Our bodies support vast colonies of bacteria upon which we depend, and which depend on us. Literally, we feed them and they feed us. But an evolutionary understanding of how humanity comes into being also raises questions related to artificial intelligence. Because if our humanity can evolve through chemical interactions under the influence of certain simple rules of mutation and adaptation, then isn't it possible that something like a human could evolve out of different interactions but under the same rules? Once humanity arises from natural processes, we have to ask why one set of natural processes, driven by chemical interactions between organic molecules, should be privileged over another set of natural processes driven by electrical interactions with inorganic molecules like silicone. If we could evolve into rational, self-conscious humans, why couldn't artificial intelligences evolve into something rational and self-conscious? Couldn't they create their own social relationships and eventually organize their own culture? That's something we've also imagined in our science fiction. If the rigid hierarchical categories that limited our understanding of what it means to be human are breaking down with our understanding of how humanity comes into being, then is there a place on the spectrum for artificial intelligences that don't fit into our traditional categories of what it means to be human? We humans understand ourselves less and less as occupying a distinct place in a hierarchy of creatures and a hierarchy within society, and more in terms of constantly shifting relationships with both the natural and the social worlds. And this opens the way for artificial intelligences to evolve into both our social and the natural worlds of which we are a part. And as artificial intelligences become part of our world, it should not be surprising that our self-understandings change. And again, this is particularly true of digital worlds, which are the natural home of artificial intelligences that may not have a physical body, apart from a bunch of circuit boards, but can easily represent themselves through digitally created avatars. And in fact, they are already doing it.